Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to take your stack of source material, cut through all the noise, and really pull out the insights that last. Today, we are diving into a topic that is, frankly, a little unsettling, I think, for anyone who leads or manages or, mentors in any capacity.
It really is. It's that uncomfortable question we're all sort of taught to avoid asking ourselves.
Which is,
What if the most meaningful measure of your leadership isn't what you built? Not the size of the team, not the height of the building or any of those quantifiable metrics, but instead, what remains, what actually thrives when you're no longer in the room.
wow, yeah, that immediately flips the script on the entire modern leadership obsession. We're just saturated with a culture that rewards visibility, personal branding, and that chase for the immediate visible win. It's all about the title, the applause, that growth curve. It's about being known.
It is, and the sources we went through, they really highlight this deep, deep tension. We've mastered the art of, say, optimization and rapid growth, but we've neglected something that's, I think, far more important for long-term health.
Which is legacy.
Legacy, yeah, but defined by faithfulness and stewardship, not by fame.
Okay, let's unpack that. That's the mission for this deep dive then. Exploring this really countercultural perspective. We're digging into how true legacy gets built. And the goal here is to give you some grounded, actionable insight to help you think past the next quarter, beyond your current role, and into the future that you're quietly shaping right now.
And we have to start with that quiet question. Will my work endure? Most high-performing leaders, they just operate under the assumption that if the vision is strong enough, the legacy will just
It'll
happen.
take care of itself.
Right. But history shows the opposite. Left unattended, even the strongest visions erode. Cultures drift. Values, they inevitably dilute. True legacy requires this intense intentionality and, crucially, setting aside your own ego preservation.
It's fascinating how consistently the great historical writings, the spiritual texts, challenge that instinct to measure success by how far you climb or how widely you're known. I mean, if you were starting a massive organizational effort, how would you define the success metric for your chief executive?
Well, you wouldn't define it by the size of their office,
Yep.
right? You'd define it by whether they executed the core mission you gave them. And that's why the sources consistently argue that the definition of true success is not measured by fame, but by faithfulness. It's a matter of reliability.
And the source material highlights this so well by framing the leader as a steward, right? Someone
Yeah.
who has been entrusted with something valuable that doesn't actually belong to them.
Precisely. If a leader is a steward, then the highest compliment they can get is just reliable. As one source puts it, leaders are stewards entrusted with the mysteries, and it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. The visibility of the outcome is secondary. It's faithfulness to the task that's heaven's metric. It's about being accountable for the input, the discipline, the character, the obedience, not just the flashy output.
So the contrast in leadership posture is just. It's stark. If your main driver is visibility and approval, you're almost guaranteed to build a fragile kind of success. It looks impressive, it might get headlines, but it's fundamentally unsustainable.
That is the danger of prioritizing, say, a platform over people or systems over successors. It's a success model that's just designed to collapse once that charismatic figure leaves. We see this so clearly in ancient history. Take Saul, the first king of Israel. He was impressive, he was publicly affirmed, physically striking everything you'd want in a charismatic leader.
Right? He had the outward success, the public win, the big title, but then we read that he was deeply unfaithful. So what was the operational implication of that?
It produced a leadership that was just anchored in insecurity and control. Saul's need for approval meant he was always prioritizing short-term, crowd-pleasing decisions over the core instructions he was given.
He was afraid.
Terrified of losing his position. And that made him totally incapable of cultivating strong successors or truly delegating authority.
Yeah.
His failure was operational and spiritual. He created systems built entirely around his own ego, and, well, his legacy collapsed in a single generation.
And then you contrast him with David. David was so flawed, and the sources are quick to remind us of his epic failures, his chaotic family, his failures as a father. If legacy is about transfer, how do we reconcile his, global faithfulness with his messy domestic failure?
And that's where the nuance is so essential. David's legacy wasn't defined by personal perfection, which he obviously lacked. It was defined by his posture of relational faithfulness. When he failed, he repented. He recognized he was a steward, not an owner. His life was oriented toward the bigger mission, the covenant. And that consistency of posture, that commitment to a higher mission even through personal failure, is what ensured continuity. Saul anchored his leadership in himself. David anchored his in the enduring mission.
So the lesson for any modern leader is just vital. When your season ends, when the applause fades, what will actually remain? Is it something that bore your name, or is it a culture and a capacity that carries your deeply embedded values?
Which leads us right into the most radical truth in this source material, I think. It's one that's often missed by all the conventional business books.
Good, what is it?
The most influential leaders, they plan intentionally and proactively for their own absence.
That is so counterintuitive. Most success metrics reward presence. The leader who is always indispensable, always in charge, always deciding. But you're saying true success is in anticipating the exit.
Absolutely. They don't just ask who's being used on the current project, they ask who's being formed for the future one. And this all comes down to the core belief that leadership is borrowed authority. It's stewardship, not ownership. And those two mindsets are, they're mutually exclusive.
Let's deepen that distinction. Ownership versus stewardship. This applies to everything from a family business to a nonprofit board.
Ownership is about control. It wants permanence for the self. It fears the exit. If I own it, I decide everything. I build a system that requires my presence.
Their validation, yeah.
For perpetual validation. Stewardship, on the other hand, anticipates the exit. It recognizes the mission, the people, the resources. They were just entrusted to you for a time. So stewardship produces multiplication because its success is measured not by how much I control, but by how much capacity I've successfully transferred.
I love that analogy of the aging leader sitting in the back row, totally unnoticed during a meeting. That moment is the ultimate revelation, isn't it?
Yeah.
It instantly shows whether you build capacity or dependency.
It does. If the team or the organization just grinds to a halt because the original leader isn't there to sign off on every decision, they were just building a monument to themselves. They failed the stewardship test.
And the cost of that failure is massive. We see it in that chilling historical example, that generational silence. After the huge, visible success of securing the Promised Land under Joshua, the sources record this haunting aftermath. Another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel.
Just think about that profound failure. They secured the victory, the land, the foundation, all the hard work was done. But the faith, the values, the why, that was not relationally transferred. It wasn't institutionalized in the hearts of the next generation.
Wow.
Legacy is sustained by discipleship, by intentional transfer, not just by the momentum of a great success. You can win the biggest battle, but if you don't embed the core values relationally, the entire thing just atrophies in one generation.
And this brings us back to that ultimate paradox of exit. Moses, the greatest human leader in their history. And he never even entered the Promised Land himself.
He never saw it. Never saw the final fulfillment of the promise he worked toward for 40 years. Yet his leadership shaped the entire nation for centuries. His faithfulness wasn't measured by his personal achievement of the final goal,
But by his conduct along the way.
his conduct and, crucially, his final acts.
And what were those?
They were acts of letting go, commissioning Joshua publicly, blessing the tribes, making sure every system and every person was positioned for continuity without him. True faithfulness is measured not by holding on, but by the intentional strategic act of releasing authority when the time comes.
Okay, that brings us to the most practical part of this deep dive. If we accept this framework, that legacy is about transfer, not termination, how does a leader actually do this? What does a legacy transfer plan look like on the ground?
First, you have to focus ruthlessly on multiplication over dependence. If you are indispensable, you're not a successful leader, you are a bottleneck. Faithful leadership has to actively, patiently, and sometimes painfully work itself out of centrality.
Empowering others.
Empowering others to take over functions that you currently perform.
And the sources are so clear about what needs to be transferred first. It's values before vision. Vision inspires, that's important, but vision alone is highly unstable.
Exactly. Vision gets people on the bus. Values determine where that bus goes when you, the driver, get off. Vision without values produces followers who can replicate your results. They know what to do, but they can't reproduce the essential faith or character behind the mission.
So when things get hard,
When things get hard or when a shortcut looks tempting, only those embedded values can sustain the organization.
this sounds like the essence of Paul's strategy for reproducible leadership, the multiplicative model he lays out for Timothy. It's not about finding one superstar successor.
No, not at all. It's the ultimate chain of transmission. What you have heard from me, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. That's 4 generations of leadership training in one sentence. Paul trains Timothy, who trains reliable people, who then train others. Influence is magnified by equipping others to reproduce it in a scalable way, instead of trying to hoard the central knowledge yourself.
So if you're listening right now, looking at your current role, you want to start building this kind of transfer system, we've got 3 key actionable insights distilled from the material. What's the first one?
1. Prepare successors, not admirers. You have to set your ego aside and aim for those you train to surpass you completely. Your goal is not for them to just preserve your work or mimic your methods. Your goal is for them to innovate and build better, stronger organizations than you did.
That is a huge shift in mindset. A lot of leaders, I think, unconsciously fear being eclipsed.
It is, but it's so necessary for institutional health. The second point is operational. You must share authority, not just responsibility.
That's a classic pitfall in delegation, isn't it?
Mhm.
Leaders hand off tasks, the responsibility, but they hold on to the ultimate decision-making power.
Which is debilitating. If you delegate tasks but not the decision-making power, the authority to fail, learn, and correct, you're just creating highly dependent assistants. You are not building competent future leaders with a sense of ownership. Capacity is only built when people feel the full weight of a decision, good or bad.
And the third insight deals with where this work actually happens. Embrace obscurity as formation.
Yes. Some of the most critical work of building a legacy happens completely unseen. In patient correction, quiet consistency, those one-on-one conversations where you transfer character right alongside competence, that kind of work never shows up on a quarterly report.
That leads perfectly into our final idea,
Oh.
the endurance of hidden work. We're all so impressed by the loud, dramatic, visible moments of leadership, but the sources suggest legacy is fundamentally shaped in quiet consistency.
History is definitely impressed by spectacle, but faithfulness, in its truest sense, it measures what history often overlooks. Just obedience and perseverance in ordinary time.
You think about the great historical figures the sources bring up who spent years in unseen places. Joseph spent years in prison, just faithfully managing responsibilities, interpreting dreams. Anna spent decades in the temple, serving in obscurity.
God often does his greatest work underground, nurturing character and readiness long before the harvest is visible to the world. That mundane, unseen obedience, the small, consistent acts of integrity no one claps for, that is not wasted. It's the essential foundation. The sources remind us, your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you.
And finally, that hidden work cultivates the most valuable inheritance of all, endurance. Resilience is everything.
Because leadership is ultimately tested in seasons of trial and delayed reward. The truly enduring leader is the one who runs with endurance the race that is set before us. Resilience models a faith that is reliable, and that is the most valuable inheritance you can transfer to the next generation. More valuable than any system or dollar amount.
So let's bring this all together. What is the big takeaway from this deep dive?
I think it's that leadership success, biblically defined, is a disciplined detachment from pursuing personal visibility and a reattachment to the discipline of faithfulness. It means embracing stewardship, anticipating your own absence, and intentionally cultivating capacity in others. We just need to be sober and candid when we reflect on our decisions. Are you building something that requires you to be the central pillar or something that will flourish without you?
Your influence is immortalized not by how long you were remembered, but by the momentum you created. The ultimate measure of influence is not how long your name was on the plaque, but whether God's work continued through faithful lives long after your voice grew quiet.
A legacy that truly endures is one that you intentionally released, knowing that the mission was always bigger than your personal contribution.
Food for serious reflection. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.